It's more than just radio.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
It's the next step in the evolution of radio.
On my phone.
I just love it.
In the App Store. Or get the app now at WCBM.com.
It's 8:36, 24 minutes now before the hour of 9 o'clock. It has been 1,131 days that political prisoners have been held unconstitutionally, without trial dates, without bail, in the D.C. Gitmo, or Gulag as we call it. Our next guest is a 33-year-old Army Reserve veteran who was incarcerated for nonviolent offenses on J6. Again, he was charged with obstruction of an official proceeding, which is his only felony charge. That's the one that's before the Supreme Court, if overturned, which it may be. Our next guest, Tim Hale, will be exonerated, and the felony will be removed from his record. Tim spent nearly 3 years in the D.C. Gulag. For 1 year, he spent 23 hours a day in solitary confinement in the D.C. Gitmo. And he joins us now on our Newsmaker hotline. Tim, thank you for your service. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate the opportunity.
What is it you want to say to the American people, the experience that you have gone through, because you were there that day, and you were obviously exercising your First Amendment rights, and this bogus charge of obstruction of official proceeding? What is it? What is the most important takeaway, your message to the American people?
Well, first, if I can keep it local, I just want to give a shout-out to Jeff McDonald and the Patriot Club of America for, hosting an event for the January 6th defendants recently, hosting Patriot Freedom Project. And I'm grateful to all you, to the fact that you guys are even talking about this. I think keeping things local really is what's going to get as much information out as possible. As for that day, there's no easy way to explain it because it's a very complicated issue, but I'll say this. I was there for a Trump speech. I went there in a suit and a tie. I went out the night before and got brand new dress shoes from Men's Warehouse. If I was trying to overthrow the government, I probably wouldn't have been, I probably would have chosen different attire.
You didn't have the insurrection shoes on?
Yeah, combat dress shoes,
Yeah, I think actually they sell insurrection shoes, special shoes, at many shoe stores. If you're planning an insurrection, that's the thing to wear.
I can believe it. Yeah, you probably would if you read if you read the government's indictments for people.
Yes.
But look, most people went to hear a speech, and the truth is that the perimeter of the Capitol building was breached, I'd say a half hour before I showed up. So this is while Trump is still giving his speech. There are these police barriers that get knocked over. There's a lot that goes into it. You might have heard the name Ray Epps.
Yep.
The public is starting to hear a little bit about the agitators that were there, the agent provocateurs. The Proud Boys basically were led into a trap. They were infiltrated by federal informants like James Knowles. And these people, look, it is what it is. A couple, I'd say, 5 Capitol Police were covering the entire perimeter of where that happened. You have Officer Caroline Edwards, who testified in front of Congress that Ryan Samsel knocked her over and knocked her out, and she was in a puddle of blood. And so, this is all atrocity propaganda. You can see it on the video that they actually help them. She gets knocked over and she gets picked right up. So, this is atrocity propaganda. Unfortunately, the American public has been lied to by the fake news. They've been watching the same 20-second clips for 3 years. They don't show you that there are all these photographers and cameramen there and that it's totally staged, right? And so this, unfortunately, for people like me, we walked into a trap. Because, like I said, a half hour before I showed up is when these barriers got knocked down. So for thousands of people who leave the Trump speech and go to the Capitol just to protest, they don't know that there were barriers there in the first place. They don't know that there were signs that said restricted area that got literally cut down. And so people walked into this trap. But I have video after 3 years, and unfortunately I had to serve my sentence, but now I'm posting the actual evidence. I'm putting it all on my Twitter, for God's sake. I have video showing that people were just standing around on the Capitol grounds doing nothing. You were chanting USA. We were singing God Bless America. And so for the average person, there was no malicious intent at all. But like you mentioned, that obstruction charge, the 1512, 18 U.S.C., 18 U.S.C. 1512. That obstruction charge is an Enron-era scandal for destroying documents, but the feds planned ahead of time to use this against people, and now they're using it against President Trump. And I tell you, we don't need to get into names if you're not comfortable, but, like, I was in jail with people who confessed that they were actually at the Capitol to get out of trouble from drug conspiracies in 2020. And those are the first defendants to have 18 U.S.C. 1512 upheld in federal court. And so the first defendants to have 1512 upheld in federal court were federal informants. That makes this whole thing seem like it was completely orchestrated to get at Trump. It makes it look like all three branches are coordinating.
Yeah, that's why we've called it the Fedsurrection from day one.
Absolutely.
Because it was highly suspicious, and now we know more thanks to some of the tapes that have been released, thanks to Tucker, Julie Kelly, and others. Tim, 3 years, of which 1 year you spent in solitary confinement. How were you treated in this gulag in D.C.?
Well, so I did talk about atrocity propaganda, so I do want to be fair. The first year was absolutely terrible, but I want to say that the conditions were not always the same. So you have people now, and I want your audience, to get a fair assessment. It's not good in the D.C. jail, but there are some people who, I think they are irresponsible in how they describe their conditions because they want to control their own narrative.
Yeah.
So people are not getting beaten in the jail every day. They're not being starved. But here are the real issues with the D.C. jail. The D.C. jail, for the first year especially, used COVID-19 as an excuse to keep us locked down. So if people wonder, well, why? How could they possibly keep people locked in solitary for a year? Like, how could they get away with that? This is America, right? And the answer is that if you lived in a blue state like I did in New Jersey, or where California, New York, I don't know how it was in Maryland, but, like, in general, they basically flushed the Bill of Rights down the toilet. And it was no different in the D.C. jail. We were on lockdown, and they used COVID-19 as an excuse, even though that was, obviously not real. We were not allowed religious services. We were not allowed to see our attorneys. They tried to withhold our evidence, so we couldn't review discovery. Now, keep in mind, we were pre-trial detainees. So we couldn't leave the jail, but we're also supposed to be able to work on our cases. It wasn't really possible. I think I also got about maybe 6 hours of trial preparation with my lawyer after 16 months of being incarcerated. You weren't allowed family visits. Now, for me, look, I'll keep it straight. I'm a bit of a bum. I don't have a wife or kids. And being in the military and, I have, hardship growing up. So, I'm a pretty sturdy person. But for a lot of those guys, the real issue is that you have all these people with families who are breadwinners, and they're not able to see their families. So at the very least, they should be able to visit, and they couldn't.
No. We are unfortunately short on time. We'd love to have you back and spend some more time with you because I think your story is very compelling. The PatriotFreedomProject.com. That is a website people should go if they want to learn more and perhaps help out.
Absolutely, and I don't want to self-plug, but if people want to see some of the video that's withheld that shows all the feds and the crowds and, some of the evidence that would exonerate defendants, I'm posting that on Twitter. If you look up Tim Hale, criminally funny J6er, you'll be able to see some of that. It's not about me. It's about the guys who are still locked up.
All right. Tim, is it H-A-L-E?
Yes.
H-A-L-E.
All right.
Sure.
Tim, thanks again, and we'll talk to you again in the near future. Appreciate this.
Thank you, Tim.